What is going on, fellow music fans? Kevin from Storytellers Union, and happy that you have stopped by our channel for what's become an annual tradition for me, and that is counting down my favorite albums of the year. This year, going to do it a little bit different. In years past, I have started with honorable mentions, special collections, box sets, live reissues, those sorts of things. I'm going to do a separate video for that later on, and going to do 15 albums at a time, starting directly with my top 30 through 16 in this first half. So let's just get right to it. Starting with Kentucky's own Cage the Elephant, Neon Peel, my 30th favorite album of this past year. Matt Schultz, lead singer, has been through a lot, and you can really tell that since the last Cage record. So it's maybe a more mature sound, maybe not what everyone is expecting, not the same level of guitar noise or frantic vocals, but what you get still is a very compelling rock record that details a lot of the struggles that Matt has gone through. Highly recommend Neon Peel. Number 29, Jake Bugg's A Modern Day Distraction. Jake Bugg had hit the scene about a dozen years ago as a teenage wonderkin, and it's hard to top when you come out as a teenager and basically make a perfect debut. Was just listening to it the other day. It's still perfect. The follow-up was diminishing returns of trying to do a lot of the same things. So maybe Jake thought he needed to switch things up and began to tinker with his sound. And I'll be honest, he tinkered with it so much, I kind of checked out. And it was only this past year when I started seeing reviews from Modern Day Distraction, I even knew he had anything new out. I hadn't heard him in a while. But these reviews were basically calling it a return to form, and it wasn't just hype. It is definitely a return to the sound that had defined his earlier work, and that is a singer-songwriter indebted to Bob Dylan. It's a nice, though, mix of that sound with some of the experiments that he tried in previous incarnations over the last decade. And great results on finding that middle ground on a modern day distraction. Another Dylan-esque band is the Fleece Brothers, and they check in on my list at number 28 with A Valley of Abandoned Songs. And if that sounds like a odds and sods collection, that's because it basically is. But don't be put off by the fact that this is discarded tracks and a cobbled together selection of B-sides, because miraculously, if it wasn't for that title or knowing the backstory, you would not know that this was not a cohesive record. When you hear it, it is definitely that cohesive record, and doesn't sound like throwaway songs either that were orphaned from other projects. It's just a great Fleece Brothers record that I highly recommend. Number 27, Green Day's Saviors. This is more than what I was expecting, to be honest, from Green Day at this stage of their careers. I won't go so far as some reviews that want to say it is a return to their glory days, because you really can't go home again. You can't capture that youth again. They've tried. In recent years, Green Day have done that very self-conscious return to our original sound attempts with not a great amount of success. I think also this album benefits from the fact that it's not burdened by trying to be one of their concept albums that they began to be known for, and maybe tried once more or twice more than they should have. It's just a bunch of dads having fun, honestly, just not thinking about it, letting it rip. And what they've come up with was a series of spiky earworms, pop punk gems that I think any fan of Green Day would appreciate. I would say that maybe this would have still been a stronger album with a tad bit of editing. 15 tracks, probably could have taken 10 or 11 of the stronger ones, had a better album. But hey, if the biggest quibble I have is it's too much of a good thing, then you have a great record. I'm going to do a little cheating with number 26, and that is squeezing in two records in place of just one. And that's because The Smile did two records in place of just one in 2024. They released both Wall of Eyes as well as Cutouts. This is a Radiohead side project for those not familiar with The Smile. maybe actually, I don't even know that at this point it's fair to even call The Smile a side project. It's obvious that Tom York and Johnny Greenwood, at this stage anyway, seem more committed to The Smile than they are to their main band. And that is not a slight. It actually works out in The Smile's favor because I think, unburdened by expectations a Radiohead record would bring, Johnny and Tom are having fun, and they have become very prolific under The Smile, which they were not very prolific under Radiohead, that has been stagnant for quite a while now. But you still see strands of that DNA, that Radiohead DNA. And the fact that both of these albums were recorded in the same session, you may be thinking that one is the lesser of the other, and that one is the, outtakes, so to speak, and the leftovers. But that's not the case. These are two very distinct records, despite that shared DNA. Wall of Eyes is the more spacious, if you like that side of Radiohead-esque style of work from Tom and Johnny. Go for Wall of Eyes. If you like their busier, more groovier work, cutouts can be surprising. It's a little more energetic than we've heard either The Smile or Radiohead, quite honestly, in some time. Both albums worth a listen and a stream or two. Number 25, Revelator from Phosphorescent. It's the first Phosphorescent album in 6 years, worth the wait. That fragile, cracked voice still floats above warm, lush instrumentation that has become familiar to fans of Phosphorescent. The song's lyrics may be a little more depressing, but not despairing, really, because that beautiful music that surrounds and lifts everything that Phosphorescent does makes sure that there is still some solace in this work, and definitely not a downer of a listen. Number 24, you certainly would not call this a downer of a listen. You might be perplexed, some may, when you give this one a listen, and that is English Teacher, This Could Be Texas, which for me is just exciting to have on my list because I'll be honest, this year when it comes to new acts that I discovered, the pickings were a little slim, which is why I'm very thankful that I found English Teacher, who packed a debut album that I promise will be surprising and unlike anything else you're going to hear this year. It's just so bursting with ambition, left turns that surprise at every corner. It can vacillate between being very deep and then absurdly funny in the same lyrical stanza. The same holds true for the musical ideas as far as that diversity. At times you're hearing this obtuse prog rock. It can then go to something like really poppy and colorful. You have this post-punk thing at times bumping up against this folk electronica. And if all that sounds like a lot, it's because it really, this album does contain everything. And at times is everything. It's hard not to be amazed, even if it's not your cup of tea. You cannot listen to this and be anything less than impressed with the ambition and what a striking and bold announcement of English Teacher's arrival is the album This Could Be Texas. Clocking in at 23 on my favorite albums of this past year is Richard Hawley with In This City They Call You Love. Hawley is an enchanting balladeer from another time, honestly. He sounds like he could have been lifted out of the roots pop movement of the 60s. If you like the sophisticated pop work of Roy Orbison in the 60s, think along those lines. There's touches of rockabilly as well as the classic crooners in Richard Hawley's voice. I'd actually lost touch with him. I still hold his album Standing at the Sky's Edge as one of the greatest albums that most people have never heard of. Maybe not as impressed with some of the other albums that I have heard from him since then, though they all have their moments. But In This City They Call You Love is definitely the strongest album I've heard from Hawley since that lost classic that is Standing at the Sky's Edge. Check out the song People. You'll know right away if it is for you. The enchantments of Hawley's sound is evident in that song and throughout this entire record. Number 22, the Avett Brothers. I will stipulate by saying I loved the Avett Brothers from the moment I first heard them more than 20 years ago. I've never left an Avett Brothers concert that I did not also love just because of what amazing live performers they are. However, what I have maybe not loved as much in a while is a complete studio album by the band. Each album has their moments. There's not been a bad Avett Brothers album. They're just too good of at their craft to not have a few good songs on each record. But I did think that their last 2019's Closer Than Together was a kind of a low watermark when it came to the band's creative output. I think the fact that they have self-titled this album as a maybe a reintroduction, if you will, I think that goes to show that they too may have realized that it was time for a creative reboot, and consider this, that reboot and a return really to what the band has always done best. They strip away a lot of the artifice that has come to maybe clutter their more recent work, and it is just earnest folk pop, for which the band had first earned its reputation. And they also have returned to an indie label that they were on 20 years ago, after being a decade or more on the major label system. So if this is a reboot, if this is a realization, a course correction, it's not a perfect record, but it is definitely a needed change for the band and points them back in the direction that I hope they continue to go. Worth a listen, the Avett Brothers. Speaking of returns, this next one will floor you. The Black Crowes, Happiness Bastards. The Robinson brothers made Nice a few years ago, which was surprising considering the animosity that had developed between the brothers through the years. But it's not really that unusual for bands to put the feud behind them, to do a cash in on the nostalgia touring circuit. And the Black Crowes definitely hit that touring circuit hard. And I saw them on that, in the reunion era, and they sounded great. What most bands don't do, though, when they reunite, is make a album as strong as what the Black Crowes have done here. They have put whatever problems they have behind them and went back to a back to basics rock sound that stands up to the classic work of their past. Honestly, I'd put it in the top 3 albums they've ever done. It's swaggers, it's struts, it's soulful, it's bluesy. It's the Black Crowes. If you like the Black Crowes, you will love Happiness Bastards. It makes you hope that this is not just a creative partnership that's been rekindled, but also one that is hopefully being built to endure, because we need a follow-up to this fantastic album. Moving into the top 20, we have the Mavericks with the album Moon and Stars. Decades at this point into a very impressive career, the Mavericks just continue to refuse to phone it in, and Moon and Stars is just more impressive evidence of that. That band's classic Latin-infused Americana sound is on display, as are Raul Malo's powerful vocals. This despite the fact that he has been fighting a cancer battle that has obviously not sapped his voice at all. The songwriting is worthy of that Roy Orbison-like instrument that he maintains, and the arrangements are fantastic also. There's still nods to their hit-making days, with upbeat songs like Overnight Success and Live Close By, Visit Often. Of course, the ballads are also going to shine, always would with Raul's voice. I'd suggest trying the title track for an example of that. That one's a duet with the that features Sierra Farrell, which fans of her will definitely want to check out as well. Top to bottom, an album you will want to return to. Number 19, the Linda Lindas. When the Linda Lindas first hit the scene in 2022, their first album, much of the attention that they received was due to their ages, their gender, and their nationalities. And I mean, it can, it's unfortunate in some ways because it could obscure what was really a great debut, but it can be understood because it's just not usual that people this young, especially an all-female band this young, break out the way they did in punk rock of all things. It was genuinely impressive to hear teenagers playing this kind of music, especially when they come from underrepresented perspectives, considering the females are of Chinese, Mexican, and Salvadorian nationalities. So this great story maybe overshadowed what people should have been paying attention to, and that was their art. I don't think the mistake's going to be made twice, though, because No Obligation shows it was no fluke, that these women are in it for the long haul. Yes, they're still young. They're all 20 or under. The youngest member still clocks in at 14, which is amazing considering this is album number 2. But this album improves on the quality of what was already a very impressive debut. It is hooky punk rock that is enthusiastic, joyful, as anything you're going to hear that came out this past year. Even joyful when they're dealing with serious topics and topics that affect young people, young women, self-discovery, teenage doubt. These things are tackled in a way that is extremely compelling on record. And try resisting the charms of All in My Head. I dare you. You will not be able to. Number 18, Christopher Owens. One of my favorite titles of an album this year is I Want to Run Barefoot Through Your Hair. For those who are familiar with Christopher Owens, you may recall that he was the lead singer of a band called Girls, who put out 2 of the greatest indie rock records of the 2000s, around the late 2009-ish period to 2011. 2 really near perfect records. And then Owen disappeared. And if after a couple of solo records, I should say, he disappeared, but it's been a while since we have heard from him. And if you're not familiar with his story, he really has been on a journey like no other. His backstory is he was raised in the Children of God cult that he escaped. And then of course, Girls came and there was the success of that. And if you wonder where he's been lately, well, things have continued to not go well for Christopher Owens. A Girls reunion never really got off the ground before Owens's partner, Chet White, died at the all too young age of 40. And then the hardships continued when his fiance, who he was trying to start a family with, left him after he had a motorcycle accident and was bedridden. And during that time, he also lost his day job where he was a barista, and that's what paid the bills because the motorcycle accident was serious. He had no health insurance. Pandemic hit, that now he has no way of touring. Bottom line is he ended up homeless. He was living in a camper with the only friend he had left, he said, and that was his cat. And then someone stole the camper with the cat inside. And if this all sounds like an over-the-top country song, I know it seems like a lot. It is definitely a song, and it is the song that Christopher Owens sings on I Want to Run Barefoot Through Your Hair. He talks about a lot of these hardships, but he's such a powerful songwriter, and it's such a powerful recounting of his journey that it doesn't wallow in despair despite the origins from which it is made. He has this great songwriting ability to retain a optimistic outlook, and there is slivers of hope that bleed through this. And maybe it's the hopeful, buoyant arrangements of some of the songs. Maybe it's the fragility of his voice that just draws you in and, provides that empathy that, all maybe is not lost as you listen to this album. It's emotionally compelling. And it's a return that I hope is a turnaround for a turnaround moment, not just in his career, but in the life of Christopher Owens. Number 17, Brittany Howard, the former front woman of Alabama Shakes, returned with What Now? And Brittany Howard is just a chameleon that remains in possession of one of the finest voices in music, definitely one of the more powerful voices. And What Now is not the personal record that her last album, Jamie, was. That was also a very, very highly recommended record by me. But what Jamie had in focus What Now has in impressive range and diversity. It showcases vintage soul, funk, dance floor romps. Basically, is a showpiece that Brittany Howard's voice is elastic enough to conquer any genre she puts her mind to, and it really is so good and such high quality that it's pointless to try to pigeonhole Brittany Howard into a genre, especially pigeonholing What Now into a genre. Just enjoy the album for the brilliant piece of work that it is. Which then brings us to the last album on this half of my top 30. And we'll end with number 16, the Old 97's American Primitive. The Old 97s have been perfecting their blend of cowpunk, alt country, teenagers when they first got together. Now they're men who are on their 13th album, 32 plus and counting now years into her career. And what a journey it's been, while never really straying too very far from the sound that they emerged from Texas with. They had some dalliances with some pop and some rockier elements, but over time, it's just matured to be the sound that is the Old 97s. Check out the nostalgic Where the Road Goes if you really want a primer as for what you are expected, what you can expect in this. And that video is fantastic too, showing the younger versions of themselves juxtaposed with the modern day versions of the Old 97. It's just a showcase for all that we've basically taken for granted of the Old 97s, and that's their gift for clever lyrics and their Clash meets Cash aesthetic that is the music of the Old 97s on full display on American Primitive. And with that, I will say thank you for watching, and I hope that you will check out the second half of this video, and that is going to be the top 15 albums, including the number one album that I heard in 2024. Would love to hear your comments in the sections below. Let us know what I missed out on and what were your favorite albums, and join us for the second half of the countdown. Appreciate it. See you then.